Welcome to the In Sync Now, bringing you the latest news from around the world. A vital artery of North American commerce has been clamped shut, sending shockwaves through both nations. The silence at the border is a stark reminder of how quickly the flow of goods and people can be disrupted, leaving communities on both sides anxious and uncertain about what comes next. The Alaska Highway, stretching 1,387 miles through rugged wilderness, is more than just a road. It's a lifeline connecting the continental U.S. to Alaska. For decades, it has served as a critical supply route, supporting families, businesses, and entire communities that depend on its steady flow of goods. Now, trucks carrying food, fuel, and medical supplies face new prohibitive tolls imposed by Canadian provinces. These measures, a direct response to aggressive U.S. tariffs, have left drivers stranded and supply chains in chaos, with essential goods piling up at the border. The stakes are high, threatening to isolate Alaska from the rest of the continent and disrupt the lives of millions. For many, the fear of empty shelves and rising prices is becoming a daily reality, as uncertainty grows about how long the standoff will last. The crisis erupted with stunning speed, rooted in the return of Donald Trump to the White House and a new era of economic protectionism. His administration's policies have reignited old tensions, catching many by surprise. Sweeping tariffs were enacted, targeting Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber, industries vital to both economies. The ripple effects were immediate, with prices rising and cross-border business grinding to a halt. Canada, under Prime Minister Trudeau, initially sought a diplomatic solution, urging calm and negotiation. But as pressure mounted from within, provinces like British Columbia took matters into their own hands, targeting the Alaska Highway with new tolls and restrictions. For Alaskans, the highway is a necessity, not a luxury. The sudden tolls sent prices soaring and shelves emptying, leaving families to wonder how they'll get by. Small businesses, already stretched thin, now face impossible choices as costs skyrocket and deliveries slow to a trickle. Businesses scramble for alternatives, turning to costly air and sea routes. But Alaska's remote geography offers few viable options. The sense of isolation grows, as the state's unique dependence on the highway becomes painfully clear. President Trump called Canada's move hostile, threatening even harsher retaliation and raising the specter of a complete border closure. The rhetoric has only heightened tensions, with both sides digging in and refusing to back down. International observers now fear a full-blown trade war as allies and trading partners watch nervously. The world's longest undefended border is suddenly a flashpoint, with global markets bracing for further shocks. What began as a dispute over a single highway has spiraled into a major diplomatic crisis, threatening to redraw the economic map of North America. The ripple effects are being felt far beyond Alaska, as industries and workers across the continent brace for uncertainty. The U.S.-Canada relationship stands at its most fragile point in decades, with trust eroding and the future of cross-border cooperation hanging in the balance. The world is watching, as two close neighbors find themselves on the brink of a historic rupture. The Alaska Highway, constructed at breakneck speed during World War II, was a monumental engineering feat. Built by thousands of soldiers and civilian workers, it carved a path through some of the most rugged and remote terrain in North America, forever changing the fate of Alaska and its connection to the rest of the continent. Today, it stands as Alaska's primary land link to the lower 48 states, stretching over 1,300 miles through vast wilderness and connecting distant communities to the outside world. An astonishing 75% of Alaska's inbound road freight travels this route through Canada. Everything from groceries and construction materials to vital oil industry parts and medical supplies. Without this artery, daily life in Alaska would grind to a halt. The highway is a lifeline for 730,000 Alaskans, connecting isolated communities, supporting local businesses, and fueling a thriving tourism industry that brings visitors from around the world. Alternatives are limited. Sea transport is much slower and subject to seasonal ice, while air freight is prohibitively costly for most goods and can't match the volume needed. And Alaska's harsh weather often disrupts both sea and air routes, making the highway even more essential during emergencies or winter months. Any disruption to the highway means higher costs, empty shelves, and critical shortages across the state, impacting every Alaskan family and business. For decades, U.S. and Canadian officials worked together to ensure smooth transit, maintaining this vital link through mutual benefit, trust, and shared responsibility. But now, that trust has been shattered by rising tensions and diplomatic disputes. casting uncertainty over the future of this critical corridor. The highway's vulnerability is exposed, transforming what was once a symbol of international cooperation into a pressure point in a growing conflict between nations. Alaska's dependence on this single route is now a glaring weakness, leaving its people and economy at the mercy of forces beyond their control. The crisis has forced both countries to confront the fragility of their interconnected economies and to reconsider the security of their most vital supply lines. The Alaska Highway is no longer just a road, it's become a battleground, a symbol of both dependence and division in a rapidly changing world. The crisis began with Trump's second inauguration and a swift return to protectionist trade policies. The White House imposed steep tariffs, 25% on steel and aluminum, 15% on Canadian lumber, aimed at forcing new trade negotiations. The administration believed the U.S. could outlast its neighbors in a trade war. Canadian industries were hit hard, canceled orders, layoffs, and production slowdowns. Trudeau's government protested and launched formal complaints, but the process was slow. Economic pain mounted, especially in resource-dependent provinces. Provincial leaders demanded action, arguing that diplomacy had failed. Frustration grew, and Canada looked for leverage, finding it in the Alaska Highway. The seeds of a powerful counter-response were sown. The tariff war had found its flashpoint. With Ottawa constrained by political gridlock and unable to act decisively, Canadian provinces realized they could no longer wait for federal intervention. Instead, they took matters into their own hands, determined to protect their interests and respond to mounting U.S. trade pressures. The Council of the Federation, representing all provincial leaders, convened urgently and devised a bold plan: impose steep tolls on U.S.-bound commercial traffic using the vital Alaska Highway, a key artery for goods moving between the lower 48 states and Alaska. British Columbia and Alberta led the charge, justifying the new tolls as necessary road maintenance fees rather than outright tariffs, a move designed to sidestep accusations of violating trade agreements. The tolls, set at a staggering $5,000 per truck for a round trip, were carefully targeted at U.S. commercial vehicles, while Canadian traffic was specifically exempted to avoid harming local businesses. This move was calculated to inflict maximum pain on Alaska's already fragile supply chain, threatening to disrupt deliveries of food, fuel, and essential goods, while sparing Canadian citizens from any direct impact. The decision marked a dramatic shift in Canadian policy. Now it was the provinces, not the federal government, taking the lead in international retaliation and shaping the country's response to U.S. protectionism. Across Canada, the action was met with widespread approval. Many saw it as a necessary and justified defense against aggressive U.S. trade tactics, rallying behind their provincial leaders and truckers. However, the tolls quickly escalated the dispute, creating a host of legal and political headaches for both countries as lawyers and officials scrambled to interpret trade laws and negotiate a resolution. The Alaska Highway, once a symbol of cooperation, now became a new and unexpected front in the intensifying trade war between Canada and the United States. The province's bold gambit changed the game overnight, sending shockwaves through both nations and setting the stage for the next chapter in this high-stakes standoff. British Columbia moved quickly, passing emergency legislation to authorize the tolls. Electronic gantries with license plate recognition were installed at key points, ensuring U.S. trucks paid up. The RCMP and highway officers enforced compliance with heavy fines for violators. The financial impact was immediate. Shipping costs soared, and many companies faced losses or abandoned the route. The tolls often exceeded profit margins, forcing businesses to pass costs to Alaskans or halt shipments. BC justified the move with data on highway wear, but the timing made the retaliatory motive clear. The tolls were a show of force, signaling Canada's willingness to disrupt U.S. supply chains. The business model for shipping to Alaska was upended overnight. The provinces demonstrated they could wield geography as a weapon. The trade war had real immediate consequences on the ground. Alaska felt the pain instantly. Shipping costs quadrupled, and prices for basics like milk and bread jumped 20 to 30%. Remote communities suffered most, with some stores running out of essentials. Small businesses couldn't absorb the costs. Construction and tourism ground to a halt. Trucking companies abandoned the route, creating shortages and delays. The port of Anchorage was overwhelmed as cargo shifted to sea, causing backlogs and empty shelves. Governor Sarah Palin II declared a state of emergency, demanding federal aid. Alaska's reliance on a single foreign land route was exposed as a critical vulnerability. The crisis forced talk of new infrastructure and a rethinking of Alaska's economic future. The tolls did more than raise prices, they shattered Alaska's sense of security. The pain wasn't one-sided. U.S. tariffs devastated Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber industries, causing layoffs and lost investment. The Alaska highway tolls hurt Canadian towns reliant on U.S. truckers and tourists. Businesses saw revenues plummet. The broader trade war disrupted North American supply chains, raising costs for manufacturers and farmers on both sides. U.S. agricultural exports to Canada faced new threats, risking billions in trade. The dispute revealed deep economic interdependence. Decades of free trade had woven a complex web. Attempts to unravel it caused harm everywhere. The Trump administration claimed the U.S. could endure the fallout, but American businesses and workers paid a price too. The Alaska highway crisis became a case study in the dangers of protectionism. Both nations suffered, and the costs kept rising. The lesson: economic warfare leaves no winners. The tolls triggered a legal showdown. The U.S. argued they violated the USMCA and WTO rules against discriminatory trade barriers. Canada countered that the tolls were user fees for road maintenance, not tariffs. Provinces claimed authority over highways, while Ottawa was left defending actions it hadn't initiated. The U.S. filed a formal complaint against Canada, escalating the legal and political stakes. The dispute exposed tensions between federal and provincial powers in Canada. Legal resolution could take years, with no guarantee of enforcement. Meanwhile, both sides used the law to justify their actions in the court of public opinion. The legal fight became a proxy for the larger political and economic battle. The outcome remained uncertain, with the risk of further escalation looming. The Alaska highway dispute has pushed U.S.-Canada relations to the brink. What began as a tariff spat has become a crisis threatening supply chains, economies, and trust. Alaska faces an existential threat, while Canada risks a dangerous cycle of escalation. A solution requires de-escalation and a shift in trade policy. Neither side seems ready to blink. The crisis could reshape logistics, spur new infrastructure, and alter federal dynamics in Canada. It's a warning about the fragility of even the closest trade relationships. North America's model of integration is under threat. The standoff tests whether deep economic and cultural ties can survive rising nationalism. Will this be a temporary rupture, or the start of a more fractured era? The answer will define the future of the continent.